Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced by North Idaho College located on Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guests.
We are most pleased to bring you a two-week series dealing with the understanding and application of diversity in the curricula of our schools in this country. We want to especially recognize Agilent Technologies, Hewlett-Packard Corporation, and the Northwest Area Foundation that has recently given money to the Human Rights Education Foundation to hold a conference at North Idaho College on this subject. And while the conference was on our campus, we were very pleased to be able to take some of our experts at that conference and do these programs. I am so pleased to welcome to our program Linda White. She is a teacher and has been a teacher for 29 years, teaching the first and second grade. She comes to us from Roanoke, Virginia, where she serves on the city council and is the former vice mayor of that city. Our guest holds a bachelor's degree and also a master's degree from Radford University. Our guest is so deeply involved with organizational work in education. She's a former board member of the Virginia Education Association, and she's had the prominent experience of serving as a board member of the National Education Association. We want to talk with our guest today as an acclaimed diversity trainer about reacting to cultural differences. If I may call you Linda.
Please do.
I'm so happy to have you in our city, and having dinner with you last night, I learned so much about what you do, and you're very welcome on our program. But secondly, we want to thank National Education Association for allowing you to come and sponsoring your visit with us.
Thank you. I've enjoyed your city, what I've seen of it so far. It's a lovely, lovely city.
Well, it's great to have you here, and I welcome Steve Schenck, who is our regular panelist, and he is the Vice President of College Relations and Development with our college. And Steve Schenck will start our questioning with our guest.
Mrs. Wyatt and Linda, if I may, Tony gave you a very nice introduction, I'm sure very much deserved. Could you tell me a little bit more about who you deal with as a diversity trainer and what kinds of topics you cover with them?
The diversity training that I do, NEA has a cadre of 12 people that we have been handpicked across the entire country, and there are 12 of us, and we serve for 3 years, and they send us out in pairs to different areas of the country. I've been to Hawaii doing training, which was lots of fun, and Idaho and Arkansas and South Carolina, just all over the country. Some of them are really nice places to go, but regardless of the place, there are diversity issues all over the country. So, but we deal with a lot of different kinds of diversity, cultural diversity, gender diversity, sexual orientation diversity. There are lots of different avenues that we go at, and it depends on the particular group that we're going to and what their particular needs are, and we kind of try to handcraft it to their needs if need be.
Now, you said NEA sends you out, National Education Association.
That's correct.
Am I correct then in assuming that most of the people you're working with are educators?
We are either teachers or retired teachers. I think one of our people was an ESP or support person, and there is one administrator in the group. We ourselves are a very diverse group. I'm trying to think. Part of us are Asian, part of us are Hispanic, part of us are African American, part of us are gay, lesbian. We run the gamut. I mean, to get 12 people that are all together that diverse, I mean, we have a whole different variety of folks.
And if I may, let me follow up a little bit on training topics. Now, you're working with other educators, people like yourself. Are you teaching them the skills they need to teach diversity topics in their classrooms, or are you trying to build sensitivity to diversity issues?
We do 2-hour modules, so you cannot really, in a 2-hour framework, teach somebody the depth that they need to have to teach it. Ours is more of a building of awareness and a sensitivity to those diversity issues that we have around us.
Well, and that just brings me to one more question, if Tony will allow me. How great is the need? I mean, those of us in education may be incorrectly assume that we have a little higher level of sensitivity to diversity issues than maybe the general public does. But how great is the need for diversity training among educators in this country?
I think there's a great need for it, although we may feel like we are sensitive to the issues. The children that we teach are not.
I see.
Their parents many times are not. And you need those skills and that awareness of another culture to be able to effectively deal with it. I've seen teachers coming from their own frame of reference do some very unkind things to small children. You don't ask an Asian child to look you in the eye. You don't do that. If you happen to be Caucasian and a child is misbehaving and they're not looking you in the eye, that's a show of disrespect. So you would say to that, look at me when I talk to you. I mean, do you not remember your mother saying to that when you were a child?
Yes,
look
I
at me
do,
when you talk to me, when I talk to you. But an Asian child, to show great respect, bows his head and would not dream, if he were in trouble or being reprimanded, to look you in the eye. That would be the absolute total disrespect. And we need to be aware of different cultures and the way that different cultures play out in the public schools, because the days when everybody was of the same culture in a school building are just gone. That's just, I don't know where you can find that anymore in this country. If they're there are very few of them.
Wonderful example. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Since you go around the country and you honor us with your knowledge and information about how to be sensitive and how to actually celebrate, is a word that I prefer, differences of our people and our cultures. What are some of the techniques, other than this wonderful example you have given, Steve, that you use with educators? We'll have educators viewing this program that will not be at the conference and have the opportunity to hear you. What are some of the particular points that you could share that would be very helpful to educators at different levels of the educational system?
One of the things that I like to do is, each of us have many different diversities about ourselves. I am a white woman. I am from the Appalachian Mountains, so that's part of my culture. I am a heterosexual, so that's another identity that I have. We all have a multitude of those that, we're not just one thing. And one of the things that is important that I like to do is have folks get in touch with, how do I myself perpetuate some of the stereotypes that people have about my particular culture? For me, I am very proud of my Appalachian mountain culture, and there are great strengths that have come from that they're a very strong, independent lot, and very strong sense of family, that almost, you've heard of the clan kind of thing, the clannishness, the Hatfield and the McCoys, and families are very extended families, and that clan of you take care of the family and that kind of thing. Those are all things that I take great pride of out of my culture. But the other things that I perpetuate some of those stereotypes is, the very second I can kick my shoes off, they're gone. I mean, I am the epitome of the barefooted hillbilly. I hate shoes. And I need to own that I perpetuate that myth about my own culture. I love fried foods with gravy and, fried meats and gravy and that kind of thing. Those kind of heavy, traditional mountain cultural foods and there again, and you can look at my size and know that I enjoy them. But I perpetuate those things, and we all do that. And you need to be aware of that in your own culture so that you don't turn around and be angry at somebody because they make some of those assumptions about yourself.
And so when you know and understand and celebrate your culture, and then when you go to another culture, that you can also share that, but you also learn from their culture.
Absolutely. And if you can laugh at yourself about your own culture and not take yourself so terribly serious, then I think other people can begin to appreciate, and you begin to have, that's where understanding comes in. When I can say, yeah, I know those stereotypes are there, and yeah, somehow I feed into some of those, but let me tell you about some of the other wonderful parts of my culture, and that's where when you share that pride in your culture, and when I do that workshop, one of the things that I've found that's really interesting is almost every culture takes great pride in their sense of family. Now, they may display it in different ways, but there is this pride of the sense of family that comes from whether it's Asian or Hispanic or African American or whatever, that is there.
One final question before we got to Steve. That is, when you and I were talking last night, since we have a similar background,
yeah.
And we were joking about some of the stereotypes that some things are very serious and it's not humorous, of course, but when you can have humor about some of the things in your own life, I think it's helpful. We were talking about the language and that we talk slower, and some people consider a certain accent different. When you see people not understanding some of the things about you, doesn't that in turn then help you as you cross that understanding to another culture, that every culture there's some stereotypes and so forth, and when you find some of those are painful and hurtful, doesn't that help you want to know more about another culture and to remove stereotypes that one might have?
Oh, absolutely. I teach in an inner city school in Roanoke that is about 80% African American, and one of the things that I do with my children is I grew up far southwest Virginia, and as a child I grew up talking a lot like this. You went up the collar and down the creek there, a piece, and your uncle lived over there and your aunt lived over yonder. That's the way, that was the home language. And there's nothing wrong with that home language. Now, the children that I teach have that African American dialect, and that's their home language. And to say to them, okay, that's your home language, and that's okay, because I still have pieces of my home language. But know that when you get out into the bigger world, there's an expectation of an appropriate language that you need to use to be taken seriously. And you need to learn how to conjugate a verb and correct verb usages that maybe, there it go at home, maybe, where's my pencil? Well, there it go, may be okay at home. But out in the big world, you need to say, your pencil is over there. And I spend a lot of times with my children helping them to see those differences and make those leaps that they need to make. And we all know that. I think a lot of times we fail to share with our children that those kinds of things exist, and in our efforts to help them move into where they need to go in the big world, we put a negative connotation on where they were, and I think that's a big mistake. It's different, and it's okay to be different, and as you say, celebrate that difference. But no, it's like teaching children two languages. If you're from Europe, most children there grow up with at least two different languages that they speak, and nobody thinks a thing about it. Or five, right. But we don't share with our children that and there are lots of different dialects around this country. One of my best friends lives in Boston, and goodness knows, sometimes we have a hard time understanding each other. And I know she'll go back. We were on the NEA board together, and she would be with me on the board, and she would go back, and her children would say, "You've been with that Linda from Virginia woman again, haven't you, Miss Curry?" Because she'd be talking slower, and she'd have so that kind of thing. But we need to teach our children that where you come from is okay. Celebrate that, enjoy that, but learn what you need to know to be a part of the bigger world.
Thank you.
I have to jump in and give you just a quick story as an example of what you were just talking about. I used your last name in my first question intentionally, Wyatt, W-Y-A-T-T, because my wonderful friend Tony, and I understand him, he's from the South, you understood him, but I'm sure the audience thought he was saying white. And
Linda understands me better than she does you, so I get that on record.
But trust me, the audience now knows what her real last name is.
That is what, yeah.
That said, I have to ask you, I think Tony in his introduction mentioned that you've been an elementary school teacher for 29 years, 20 as a first grade teacher, the last 9 as a second grade teacher. Tell us, if you would please, how you weave diversity lessons into your second grade classroom.
It's almost like a part of breathing, that it's okay to be different, that we celebrate that kind of thing. One of the things I was telling Tony is that my school is a magnet school for the visual and performing arts, so that all of the children, K through 3, will go through 9 weeks of drama, another 9 weeks of dance, another 9 weeks of violin, and another 9 weeks of keyboard and vocal music. And then in the 4th and 5th grade, they will choose a specific area that they want concentration in. And with those kinds of opportunities in an inner city school, for our children, it's really wonderful, because they wouldn't have had a lot of those opportunities. But being a magnet school, we also pull children from the more affluent Caucasian side of town over to, for lack of a better term, our ghetto school. So you get this wonderful mix of children in there, and to watch them begin to learn from each other and appreciate each other's differences. And we talk about it. I think the biggest thing is the sharing, the talking, the not making assumptions.
How do the children react to those opportunities and those diversity lessons?
You know, if we could all be like the kids, what a wonderful world it would be. They see it for what it really is, a wonderful opportunity to learn and to grow. I mean, children are by nature curious. And if you will allow them the opportunity to experience each other and learn from each other, they're fine. Prejudice and hate are learned behaviors. They're taught behaviors. Children don't automatically come into this world hating other people and making gross assumptions about other people. They're very accepting.
Given the fact that we aren't children and we adults oftentimes, unfortunately, don't have the attitudes that we did when we were young, or should now as grown people, has it ever been a struggle for you to deliver those diversity lessons in the classroom, either with other educators or with parents?
I haven't particularly had, I think I've probably had more trouble with other educators than I have with parents and with children. In 29 years, I've never had a parent come into my classroom or have a child in my classroom that didn't love their child. You know, that's a given. Most parents, now some of them show it in more appropriate ways than others, and some have better parenting skills than others. But when you get down to the bottom line, parents love their children, and they want what's best for their children. And with that as a given, as a common ground, so to speak, you can pretty much most of the time work with parents and with their children and work through whatever the issue is.
Wonderful answer. Thank you.
I want to give you the opportunity from the perspective of the National Education Association. I'm one of those individuals that admires their progressive way of looking at helping children from all backgrounds and diversity. In some circles, when you mention programs and curricula development that involves multiculturalism or diversity, you get a very negative reaction. Would you take a moment to particularly encourage those who are policymakers in education? How do you cope with that? How do you respond to that criticism?
I guess you've asked me how I respond to it. I guess that's one of the reasons I decided to run for city council. Is I felt like that there needed to be responsible people in those positions who understood and appreciated that diversity, the need for that diversity in our educational system, which is why I bit the bullet and went into the political arena to say to my fellow politicians, this is important. Our children are crippled if we don't do that. You wouldn't think of tying your children's hands behind their back and you know, or breaking their leg. You just wouldn't do that. And yet when we teach them hate, or that other people are different, or that are different are bad, you're crippling their brains. And you're setting them up at some point in time in their lives to be hurt. Because we all will run into diverse people wherever we go. You can't avoid it in a society as diverse as the United States of America. And with the world global market like it is, and I mean, it's becoming more and more and more diverse. And that's part of preparing our children for the world that they're going to have to live in. And I agree with you. I am very proud of my organization that we have taken a stand and say that every child, regardless of its race, color, creed, or economic status, deserves a good education and a promising future.
Take this one step further.
Okay.
Some individuals isolate themselves and they do not expose their life experiences to other cultures, or they particularly shy away from people they perceive to be different than they. Share with us how an individual is really robbed from great enjoyment with that, or how enriching it is for both children and all others in society, adults, to experience diversity from a global sense.
Oh, I guess the way I explained it to my children, if I give you a pencil and a piece of paper, you can draw a lovely picture. But if I give you a box of crayons with 64 different colors in it, what you can create is so much prettier and so much is so richer. And that's the word I use, richer. And there's a black and white drawing's okay. But oh, what you can have with those 64 different colors.
We all appreciate that and understand that. Mm-hmm. Steve Shink.
I have to assume, since the NEA is taking a lead to send people like you out to do training, that there is a real need for it. How common is it, as you travel around and do your training sessions, to see other schools that are like yours in Roanoke, that are starting at the first and second grade level to involve cultural diversity matters in the curriculum?
I think it depends on the leadership in that school. I wouldn't even say it's from system to system. It almost goes from classroom to classroom, depending on the particular teacher and that teacher's, I guess, need for it, her vision or his vision to see the need for it. And a lot of times I think what happens, there's a lot of things coming down the pike now for accountability in teachings and education and standards and all of this kind of things that are very much, what's the word I want to use? Dealing in academia. And with all of the push there, I think sometimes one of the things that tends to get put on the back burner is our relationships with each other as human beings. And until we can get some of that straight, we're going to play that out in many, many different arenas. It's going to impact, you're going to see, why do black children score lower on this test? And there are reasons for that. Maybe it's because the test isn't sensitive to their culture and doesn't take into account some of their past experiences and some of their life experiences. They're very, most of our tests are, I think, culturally biased toward white middle-class people and white middle-class experiences.
You've been a teacher for 29 years. That's a nice chunk of experience to be able to draw on. In your opinion, are we making progress? Are things getting better, both from the perspective of the students and their relationships with one another, and the schools and their attitude toward these topics?
I think they are. And a lot of that comes from, again, exposure. There have been not as much as I would like to have, but certainly our children spend a lot of time watching TV. And I think their TV has gotten to the point where there are some good role models of folks from different cultures there for our children to see. I think that's a plus. That when I was a child, they just weren't there. Those are the kinds of things that are there. I think economically, a lot of, I look at parents where I teach, economically times are better so that children have more opportunities to be exposed to more things. When I first started teaching, for a child that in my neighborhood that I taught in to have gone to Disney World, and that's the biggie on the East Coast, you go to Disney World, not Disneyland, would have never happened. And yet I can look at children that I teach, and yeah, some of them have been there. They've been to the beach. Those are experiences that before our children didn't have. So there's more of a common ground of exposure by the rise in the economics of the country. Now, do we have everybody where they need to be? No. But I'm an optimist. I think we've got to be getting better.
Well, thank you for that hopeful outlook.
Time is just about up. Let me just say, as we're getting to the end of the program, to Linda Wyatt, it's been a great pleasure to have you here, and you truly are not only experienced, but you articulate so well why we are a better society when we do celebrate all of our differences.
Absolutely.
And I want to thank you on behalf of Steve Shink and our entire staff for being here, and thank you for coming to the conference. And for our viewers, they should know that we have over 300 educators registered, or did at the time we did the show, as we're opening up the conference, as we're taping the show, which will air at a later date. Thank you very much for being with us, Linda Wyatt.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you will be with us again next week when we will have yet another guest from this conference on the understanding and application of diversity that's been brought to you by the Human Rights Education Foundation, and they were gracious to let us have their guest on our program to share those thoughts with you. Please be with us again next week, and we'll discuss yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running entirely college-produced program on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us again at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.